Spirit Mornings on the Spirit Catholic Radio Network. Hello, I'm Jen Brown along with Bruce McGregor, and happy to have back with us on the program Camille Pauley. She's president and CEO of Healing the Culture. We're going to talk about 10 pro-life principles. You can go to healingtheculture.com for more information. Good morning, Camille. How are you?
Good morning, Jen. I'm doing great.
Good to have you with us, Camille. We appreciate it. And, of course, many know you from the work that you did with Father Robert Spitzer. We love Father and all the good stuff going on at the Magis Center as well. So,
yes, I do, too. He is a veritable juggernaut, and we love working with him.
All right. Well, you are the president and CEO of Healing the Culture, and there's a lot of pro-life organizations out there, Camille. What makes this one a little different?
Well, we're different because we plug people into more of the energy of the pro-life movement, the background, the philosophical reasons behind why we're pro-life. So our whole raison d'etre is to create curricula that people use in schools, in parishes, in colleges and universities, in home schools, or in other settings where they can really understand why is the Catholic Church pro-life, using reason, logic, an understanding of ethics, an understanding of justice and human rights, discussing all the philosophy that gets overlooked in the emotional argumentation. So we provide really sophisticated academic materials, and we do a lot of training so that people can engage in a more rational dialogue.
So with this rational dialogue, how do you carry out the mission?
Well, we produce a lot of books and a lot of curricula for high schools and classes. We do, like I said, we do a lot of training. And we teach 10 basic principles. We call them 10 principles of civilization, and they're critical because if a civilization doesn't hold these principles, it actually collapses. It's not just, we don't just teach principles that are essential to the pro-life movement. We teach principles that people need to hold together the very fabric of their civilization, and these are principles that go back thousands of years, some of them, others hundreds of years, and are important to our own founding of the United States.
Well, let's talk about these principles. So, as you stated, we need principles. Just as a civilization, as a culture, principles are very important. And you have broke them down, 10 principles, rules, kind of. Let's talk about some of them.
Yes, Father Spitzer starts with what he calls the principle of beneficence. And what this is, meaning do the good, it's the principle that claims that you are happiest when you are doing good for others and giving your life in surrender to God. So, many of your audiences have heard his 4 levels of happiness: physical pleasure, ego gratification. The 3rd level is doing good for others, and the 4th is surrender to God. And this principle is you will be happiest and the culture will be healthiest when the whole culture is oriented towards doing good for others and making a difference in the lives of others. And that leads to the other 9 principles and shows why principles are so important. It's not just about living for yourself. It's about making a difference to others and doing the right thing. So that kind of leads into these other principles. You've got principles of logic, and then principles of ethics, and then principles of justice. So logically, how do we reason out who we are as human beings? Then ethically, how do we understand how to treat human beings? And then justice, how do we understand how to organize society so that society is just and fair?
Right. Well, Camille, let's touch on as many of these 10 as we can. You have the you have the principle of non-contradiction, and I think this is probably one of the more important ones there because there's a lot of double speak that goes on in our culture.
This is a very important principle, especially when we're teaching in high school, because our culture is very good at making contradiction. They'll say things like, it's a baby if you want it to be, but not if you don't. If you don't want an abortion, don't get one. Well, this completely violates the principle of non-contradiction, which teaches something cannot be and not be at the same time at the same place. So you can't have the fetus being a human being for me, but not for you, depending on who's looking on it. So you can't even have a rational dialogue, and this goes all the way back to Aristotle and Plato, who said that if you dialogue like this, you end up like a vegetable because you can't say anything because everything is a contradiction. So this really helps students overcome this problem and say, okay, well then what is it? How do you know if it's a human being? And that leads to the principle of objective evidence. Well, all the objective evidence in science, in biology, shows, in genetics, points to the fact that what you have at the moment of sperm egg fusion is nothing other than a human being, a being of human origin that has its own full, unique, individual human genetic code and is guiding its own development towards the way that human beings develop. So every biologist, every medical doctor who reads medical textbooks knows that this is a full human being. Then the question is, but it's a human being, there's not a human person, right? They'll say it's a being, but it's not a human person, and there's a difference, and so it doesn't have any rights. So you need that the next principle, which is the principle of complete explanation. And it says, if you want to really understand what something is, you have to include all the data, not just the biological data. Human beings are far more than just what our biological data reveals. We also have the capacity for faith and creativity and love and generosity and all these realities that you can't define biologically. And those things exist in potentiality from the moment of fertilization. And people say, well, how do you know? You can't see it. Well, that's where we need the first principle of ethics, which is the principle of non-maleficence. And it says, do no harm. If you don't know for certain whether or not the human person exists, you have to err on the side of assuming it does. Otherwise, you violate the most basic principle of ethics, which is to do no harm. And so when you sort of go through these principles this way with young people, they start to get it. They say, oh, wait a minute. The pro-life movement is not just about emotional arguments and control, a church that wants to control my life. There's some real logic here. These are some principles that I don't want to abandon. You abandon the principle of non-maleficence, your culture's in real trouble.
Yeah, you're not throwing things at a wall at me and saying you're trying to force me to do something and give me laws. There are some logical principles behind this.
Yes, and one of the wonderful things about what we do for people is that it helps you diffuse all the emotion. It helps you really say, well, let me just reason with you for a moment. Let's talk about where we have common ground. I mean, we both agree with the principle of non-maleficence. You don't want to do harm, I don't want to do harm. You want a complete definition, I want a complete definition. You want to live for the good, I want to live for the good. Let's look at what abortion is doing to these principles. Do we really want to do this? This is why I'm pro-life. And then you're able to say, can you reason with me logically? And it really helps people, especially when you're talking with somebody who is very radically opposed to you, but has a sense of logic, really wants to be a logical person.
Yeah, absolutely. And the beautiful thing in going through these principles, I think, Camille, is that it's like a little waterfall with many levels. One just kind of naturally flows into the next, and that leads us to the principle of consistent ends and means.
Yeah, that comes directly from the principle of non-maleficence, from do no harm. It says, everybody's heard this one in a different format, it says that the ends don't justify the means. Why? Because if you make the ends justify the means, and your means are evil, then it's going to be evil. So in other words, you cannot use an evil method to get to a good end, because the evil method will undermine the good you're trying to do. So there's all kinds of great arguments why people want abortion on the surface, right? Yeah. Women should be more free. Women should have more opportunities. Every child should be a wanted child. These are great ends, and we agree with them, but not at the cost of killing a human person with intrinsic dignity and immeasurable worth to accomplish that. And that, of course, leads to the next principle of ethics, which is the principle of full potential, which says, look, you can't just judge the value of a human being based on what it looks like or what it's currently doing. You have to base human value on what we could achieve if we reached our highest potential. That's how we value born children. We say these infants who are newborn are incredibly valuable, not because of what they're doing right now. I mean, squalling and they're crying and they're pooping, but because we know that they have the potentiality to do incredible things in their future, and that makes them valuable now. So that principle, if we're going to be consistent, has to be applied to the unborn child as well. He has immeasurable worth right now because of his potentiality in his future.
And what do they say? Kids say when you talk about, and they have that value now, no matter what stage they're in, because we all have natural rights.
Yes, that's right. That's a very good point. Your ethical decisions on how to treat human persons is going to lead into how your culture is defining human rights. Our argument is because that being is immeasurably valuable, we owe that being a duty. And that duty translates into what Francisco Suarez from the 1500s, a great Jesuit great Jesuit Catholic priest, referred to as rights. The human beings have conditions that require from the rest of us duties not to harm, and we call that a right. And so there are three natural rights that have been defined historically by Suarez, by Thomas Jefferson, by John Locke, as life, liberty, and property. And we know that these are inalienable. They cannot be removed from you because they're part of your nature. You need life to exist. You need liberty in order for us to actualize our full potential. And you need property, a sense of, your environment being peaceful and secure so that we don't all kill each other and take one another over or, become slaves to each other. And that leads to the next principle of justice, which is the hierarchy of rights. And this one's so important. And this is where the lights start really turning on in young people. These rights are naturally ordered. You have to have life protected before you protect liberty. You can't claim a woman's right to liberty prior to the unborn child's right to life. Why? Because life is a necessary condition for the very possibility of liberty. If you don't have life, you don't have liberty. So you've got to protect that right first, or the other right is a moot point. And liberty and property are the same thing. Liberty has to be protected before property, because if I own you, by default, I own all your property. And then that right, the principle leads into the 10th principle of justice, which is limits to freedom, because sometimes people will say, well, what about my liberty, though? That's an inalienable right. Mm-hmm. You can't take that away. You just said so. It's part of my nature. Yes, but it has a limit. This principle says your right to freedom cannot impose an undue burden on somebody else. Like, you can't swing your fist where somebody else's nose begins. You have the right to yell, but not yell fire in a crowded theater. So there are limits to that freedom. So you can't claim I have a freedom to choose if that choice is going to result in the intentional death of another human person. And so those are the 10 principles. It's kind of a crash course. But we want your listeners to know, if they want to take this course, we have a seminar coming up in La Crosse, coming up on August 12th. It's a Saturday, and they can call the Diocese of La Crosse to register for that conference on Saturday, August 12th. And if they can't make that conference, we have a free webinar. It's a 3-hour class that we usually charge $60 for, but they can get it for free if they sign up on our website in the next few weeks. And they would go to healingtheculture.com. The course is called Life Principles Academy, and it's right there on our homepage, and it's very easy to register.
The conference that you're talking about is at Blessed Sacrament Parish on August 11th and 12th, and you can get yourself signed up to go to that physical conference by going to healingtheculture.com.
Yes, that's right, Healing the Culture. Well, no, they can't register for it through our website. They'd have to register for that conference through the Diocese of La Crosse. The Diocese of La Crosse,
okay.
Yes.
So go to the Diocese of La Crosse main website.
diolc.org.
There we go. And signed up for that.
And then if they want to take the online course, then they would go to healingtheculture.com.
Very good. Camille Pauley with us today, President and CEO of Healing the Culture. And Camille, before we let you go a little bit, I want to talk some philosophy, if we could.
Yeah.
Because a lot of folks out there wonder why it's important to teach philosophy, and would ask the question, don't young people just need to see what an abortion actually looks like to become pro-life? Why waste time with philosophy?
Yes, because one little mistake in a person's philosophy about the meaning of life, the meaning of freedom, what human rights are, how to treat people, if they make one little mistake philosophically about those things, it can lead to disastrous results. Every dictator, every tyrannical dictator in history has known that if you can change what people are thinking and believing about the meaning of their lives, what they think freedom is, what they think success is, what they think quality of life really is, about how they define love, then you can control the population to your own evil ends. And that's what's happened in our culture. You have a whole movement that is convincing people that freedom is choice, whatever you want at the moment, that happiness is material pleasure and ego gratification, independence and control, that quality of life is about having more than anybody else and getting ahead. And that's what's literally killing the unborn and killing our souls. So philosophy is very important. Just seeing what an unborn baby looks like is not enough. And we know that from the polls. The Gallup poll has consistently shown that the vast majority of the population, over 75%, know that an unborn child is a human being. But they believe, about half of those people believe abortion should be legal anyway because of a mistake in how they're defining their own meaning and what's important in life. Yeah. Philosophy is everything.
Yeah.
I can be what I want to be, and I can do what I want to do with my body.
Bad philosophy leads to bad ideas, leads to bad law.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. So, Camille, obviously you've educated hundreds, perhaps thousands of educators and working with people on this. Are you seeing that what others have seen, that the young people are really open and aware of being into this pro-life, accepting this pro-life message, and really they are kind of a pro-life generation.
Yes, they are. Over 50% of the population is now pro-life, and young people are no exception. And we're seeing amazing transformations. We do actual field testing on our stuff, quantitative analytical data on how attitudes are changing when students take our course, pre and post testing. And what we're finding is that students in our Catholic schools, sadly, only about half of them believe in those happiness level 3 and 4 as the meaning of their life. Doing good for others. They think happiness is coming from material and from ego gratification. And after taking our course, that switches from about 50% to over 90% of them choosing level 3 and 4 as their meaning in life. Prior to our course, about 50% of them are pro-life. After our course, it switches to over 80%. On assisted suicide, prior to our course, you only have about 40% who believe in the church's position on assisted suicide. After our course, it's over 60%. So the logic matters. The reason matters. You don't say 100% because some students, it's just going to take time for them to go through these issues, and there are other things involved. And sometimes abortion itself has really hurt people, and they have a lot more to work through. But the logic makes a huge difference.
Yeah. One last question, Camille, since you brought that up. Since abortion has already hurt so many people in this world, 60 million to be exact. And so I'm sure that when you go into these places that there are people dealing with maybe abortion themselves or dealing with family members. So how do you approach that issue of, well, then I'm bad or my family member is bad?
Yeah, this is where you need to integrate faith into our philosophy. Faith and reason go hand in hand. And we always make an appeal to that fourth level of happiness and talk about what that means, the fourth level, to surrender to God. It means surrendering to unconditional mercy and unconditional love. And we sometimes will tell the story of the prodigal son to show our audience what that mercy and love looks like. And that's a very moving story for men and women who have been involved in abortion. So I'm a big believer that you cannot separate faith from reason. The pro-life movement has to be unashamed of the faith foundations behind our philosophical foundation.
Beautiful.
Right. Yeah, Camille Pauley with us today. Again, the annual conference they're having August 11th and 12th, Blessed Sacrament Parish in La Crosse, Wisconsin. Just go to diolc.org. That's the Diocese of La Crosse website. Get all the information on this, and should be a wonderful, wonderful conference.
And then also you can take the free webinar, and that's at healingtheculture.com. Doing so much amazing pro-life work. Keep up the great work. Principlesandchoices.com, principlesandchoices.com, healingtheculture.com. Great to speak with you again, Camille Pauley, President and CEO of Healing the Culture. Thank you so much. We hope to maybe catch up with you again and sometime in the next 6 months or so.
I look forward to it. God bless you, and keep us in your prayers.
We'll do.
For sure.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Camille.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.
healingtheculture.com. Please check it out. They're doing amazing, amazing work. That was just so wonderful. Just check it out and just go to healingtheculture.com and just print out the 10 universal principles, a basic primer on respect for human life.
Yeah.
And just have that with you.
Like I said, it's a two-sided.
Just print it out and have it with you, and it'll be easy to answer those questions.
Digest it, incorporate it into your consciousness, if you will. And you'll be able to answer just about every question on life issues, one right after the other.